I knew something had shifted the moment my daughter-in-law set her coffee mug down on my kitchen counter without a coaster. It sounds small, I know it does. But that counter was the last thing my husband Earl put in before he passed. White quartz with a grey vein running through it like a river. He'd been so proud of it, and she knew that. She'd heard the story more than once. She just didn't care anymore. That was the thing about Renee. She didn't care anymore, and she'd stopped pretending to. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years teaching 4th grade at Garfield Elementary in Decatur, Georgia. I raised my son, Darnell, mostly on my own after Earl's heart gave out in 2019, and I did it without complaint, without drama, without asking anyone for a single thing I hadn't earned. I own my home outright, a 3-bedroom colonial on Birchwood Drive that Earl and I bought in 1998 and paid off in 2021, 4 months before he died. He never got to feel the freedom of that. I felt it for both of us. For the first year after Earl passed, I was careful. I kept my finances quiet. I didn't talk about the life insurance. I didn't mention the pension. I just lived quietly in my house, tended my garden, called my church friends on Sunday afternoons, and grieved in private the way I'd always done everything, without making a fuss. Then Darnell lost his job. He'd been a project manager at a logistics company in Atlanta. Good salary. Benefits. He and Renee had a house in Smyrna, a nice one, 4 bedrooms, more than they needed for just the 2 of them. But that was Renee. Everything had to be impressive. The kitchen had to have the waterfall island. The backyard had to have the pergola with the string lights. The cars had to be leased, not bought. Because Renee said owning a car outright was something her mother's generation did. When Darnell called me in March of last year, I could hear it in his voice before he even said the words. That low, careful tone he always used when he needed something. "Mom, I don't want you to worry," he said, which meant I should start worrying immediately. He'd been let go in a round of layoffs. 300 people, he said. Not personal. I told him I understood. I told him I was sorry. I asked if they needed anything, and I meant it the way a mother always means it, with my whole chest, not knowing yet what I was agreeing to. What I thought they needed was maybe help with groceries for a month or 2, a little breathing room while he found something new. He was 58, yes, but he had experience. He'd been good at his job. I believed that. What they actually needed, it turned out, was everything. It started, gradually $100 here for an overdue electric bill, $200 there when the car payment was due and the severance hadn't cleared yet. I didn't ask questions. That's the thing about being a mother. You learn early that asking questions makes them less likely to tell you the truth, so you stop asking and just give. By June, I was covering their water bill, their internet, and what Darnell called just a few groceries that seemed to include a lot of Renee's weekly Whole Foods hauls. I saw the receipts once. Truffle oil, imported sparkling water, a $40 candle. I didn't say anything. By August, Darnell had found part-time consulting work. Not much, he said, barely covering gas. He was still interviewing. Renee had gone back to her old salon job, but only 3 days a week because, she told me on one of her rare calls, she couldn't be on her feet more than that. Her back, she said. I'm 67 with 2 replaced knees, and I'm on my feet every Sunday at church for 3 hours. But I kept that thought to myself, too. They started coming over more. Sundays, mostly, which I liked at first. I cooked. Earl's mother's recipes, fried chicken, cornbread, collard greens, sweet potato pie. Darnell would sit at the kitchen table and talk about the job market the way people do when they're not actually applying anywhere. Renee would scroll her phone at the counter and offer compliments about the food that always felt like they were addressed to the room and not to me. I noticed other things too. The way she never offered to help clean up. The way she called my house cozy, in a tone that made it sound like a consolation prize. The way she'd look around my living room, at Earl's framed photographs, at my grandmother's quilt on the wall, at the African violets I kept on the windowsill, with an expression I can only describe as patient tolerance. Like she was visiting a museum of things that didn't matter. But it was my home, and I kept telling myself that family goes through seasons, that things would turn around. Then came the night of October 12th. My granddaughter Brianna was turning 8. She's Darnell's daughter from his first marriage, a brief, early one, before Renee, and she lives with her mother in Lithonia, but Darnell has her every other weekend. I adore that child. She has Earl's eyes, this wide, watchful, serious kind of brown, and she laughs like she means it from somewhere deep. I'd offered to host her birthday dinner. Darnell said yes. I spent 2 days on it. I made her favorite, macaroni and cheese from scratch, honey-glazed chicken thighs, green beans the way she likes them with the little bits of bacon, and I ordered her cake from a black-owned bakery in Decatur that does these beautiful custom cakes. This one had purple buttercream and little fondant butterflies because Brianna had told me in August that butterflies were her current thing. Rennie arrived 40 minutes late. She'd been at her friend's baby shower, she said, waving it off like time was something that happened to other people. She was still dressed from the shower, a silk-wrapped dress, heels, and she stood in my entryway and looked at the table I'd set and said, "Oh, you went all out." In that particular way, people say things they mean as a criticism wrapped in a compliment. I smiled. I brought out the food. I settled everyone in. What happened next, I still turn over in my mind sometimes, not because it was violent or dramatic, but because it was so deliberate. I had been in the kitchen when Darnell served the plates. I came out with the rolls and the extra mac and cheese for Brianna's, and I saw that my plate, mine, at the head of my own table, had on it the chicken thighs that had been sitting in the warming pan the longest, the ones that had dried a little at the edges, and less mac and cheese than anyone else, and no rolls, because the basket hadn't made it to my end. Renee's plate had the best pieces, center cut, golden, perfect. Brianna had already started eating and was telling me about her teacher, so I didn't make a face. I sat down. I ate what was in front of me. I told myself I was imagining things, but then Renee pushed her plate slightly forward, which was the signal she apparently used with my son to mean she was done, and Darnell automatically started clearing. And then she turned to me and said, without any particular emphasis, like she was asking about the weather, "The pergola company is coming Tuesday. We need a deposit. $1,200. Can you do Zelle?" There was a moment, just a breath of a moment, where I looked at her, at this woman sitting in my house, at my table, eating my food, wearing her party dress from someone else's event, asking me to Zelle her $1,200 for a pergola. Brianna was licking frosting off her finger. The overhead light was warm. Earl's photograph was behind Renee's left shoulder. I said, "Let me think about it." Rennie said, "It's time sensitive." I said, "I heard you." She looked at Darnell. He looked at the tablecloth. I cleared my own plate. That night, after they left, and Brianna had been picked up by her mother, I sat in Earl's armchair, the brown leather one in the corner of the living room that still holds the shape of him, a little, if you look. And I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I got out paper, real paper, and I wrote down every dollar I had given or transferred in the past 8 months. It took me almost an hour. $14,320. I sat with that number for a long time. I said it out loud once, quietly, to the room, because Earl would have made me say it out loud. He always said a thing wasn't real until you heard yourself say it. $14,320 for a pergola deposit, for sparkling water, for a car payment on a vehicle I'd never ridden in. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep much. I lay there and I thought about my mother, who cleaned houses in Birmingham for 30 years and sent money home to her own mother every month, and never once asked to be thanked for it. I thought about Earl, who worked double shifts at the plant so I could finish my education degree and come home to a daughter, to a life. That was ours. I thought about the quartz counter, the river vein running through it. I thought about what my mother used to say, there is a difference, baby, between giving from love and giving from fear. I had been giving from fear. Fear of losing my son, fear of being the difficult one, fear of the silence that might come if I said no. At 4:53 in the morning, I got up, made coffee, and got dressed. I want to be clear about something. I was not angry in the way people are angry in movies, loud, shaking, righteous. I was something quieter than that. Something that had been building so slowly, I almost hadn't noticed it arriving. It felt more like clarity than rage. Like when a fog has been sitting on a field for days, and then one morning you wake up and it's simply gone, and you can see all the way to the tree line. I could see the tree line. I drove to my bank when it opened at 9. I sat down with an advisor named Christine, a brisk, kind woman who had helped me with Earl's estate and remembered my name, and I told her I wanted to make some changes. I removed Darnell from my checking account, where he'd been listed as a secondary authorized user since 2020, when I'd added him during the pandemic in case something happened to me. I moved a significant portion of my savings into a separate account he had no access to. I requested new account numbers on my primary accounts. Christine didn't ask why. She just did it, efficiently and without fuss, and at one point she said very quietly, "You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Aldridge," and I don't know how she knew, but I felt something's loosen in my chest when she said it. Then I drove to see my attorney, a man named Gordon, who had drawn up my will years ago and updated it once after Earl died. I told him I wanted to update it again. I didn't cut Darnell out entirely. I want to be honest about that. He is my son, and whatever had happened between us, that was still true. But I restructured things. The house I placed in a trust. Brianna, my granddaughter, the one with Earl's eyes, I set up a $529 college savings account for her that her parents cannot access. Not Darnell, not Renee, just Brianna when she turns 18 for school. I added a condition on Darnell's portion of my estate that it would be administered through the trust and released in annual increments, not as a lump sum. Gordon said it was a reasonable structure. I said I thought so too. I drove home in the kind of silence that feels earned. I didn't call Darnell that day. I made myself a proper lunch. A real one, not just crackers and tea the way I'd been eating lately, rushing through meals to get back to whatever I'd been worrying about. I made a turkey sandwich on sourdough, and I sat at my kitchen table and I ate it slowly. And I looked out the back window at my garden, at the knockout roses that were still holding on even in October, and I thought, this is still mine. 3 days later, Darnell called. He'd noticed the account change, of course. He was careful in how he said it, not accusatory, not right away. He asked if everything was okay with the bank. I said yes. He asked if there had been some kind of fraud concern. I said no. Then he asked in that low, careful voice if this had something to do with Renee. I said, Darnell, this has to do with me. There was a long pause. Mom, he said, we're going through something hard. I know you are, I said. I've been helping you go through it for 8 months. Another pause. The $14,000, I said. I need you to know that I'm aware of it. I'm not saying it to punish you. I'm saying it so you know that I know, and so we don't have to pretend anymore. I heard him exhale. I didn't know it was that much, he said finally. I believed him, actually. I think when money comes from a parent, it can become invisible in a particular way. Not out of malice, always. Sometimes just out of the way we're wired to receive things from the people who raised us, as if it's still as natural and costless as it was when we were small and everything came from them. It was that much, I said, and I love you, and that's why I'm telling you, instead of just letting it continue. He was quiet for a while. Then he asked if he could come over. I said yes, but I said, alone. He came the next evening. We sat in the living room, in Earl's armchair, and the blue wingback I've had since forever, and we talked for almost 3 hours. Not shouting, not crying, though I came close a few times, and I think he did too. Just talking, the way we hadn't in years, really. About his father. About what it had cost me to keep the house after Earl died. About how I'd never told him any of it, because I hadn't wanted him to worry. He said, "You should have told me, Mom." I said, "You're right. I should have," he said. "I've been letting her handle all the," and then he stopped. Started again. "I've been checking out. From the decisions. I didn't want to deal with it, so I just let her. I didn't say anything about Renee. I had decided I wasn't going to. Whatever happened between her and my son was their marriage to sort through. I had my own house to tend. What I said was, "You are 58 years old, baby. You are not a boy anymore, and I am not your safety net. I'm your mother." He looked at Earl's photograph on the wall for a long moment. "He would have said the same thing," he said. "I know," I said. "He said it to me once, when I was leaning on my sister instead of standing up." We hugged before he left. A real one, not the side squeeze we'd been doing for a while. He held on for a moment longer than I expected, and I let him. I don't know what things look like for Darnell and Renee now. I've seen him twice since then. Once for Thanksgiving, which was different in ways I'm still processing, and once for Brianna's school play in December, where she was a cardinal, a small red bird with a pipe cleaner beak, and she sang her 4 lines with tremendous seriousness and looked at me from the stage to make sure I was watching. I was watching. I am always watching. My garden is resting now. It's January, and the roses have pulled back, and the soil is dark and cold and waiting. But underneath it, things are doing what they need to do in the dark. Getting ready. Building towards something I can't see yet, but trust is coming. I brewed tea this morning and stood at my kitchen window and looked at the backyard and thought about what my mother used to say. There is a difference, baby, between giving from love and giving from fear. I know the difference now, and I intend to spend whatever time I have left on this earth giving only from the first. That is the thing I want you to hold on to if you're listening and you recognize any piece of this story. Not the anger, not the account numbers, not even the moment at the dinner table with the dried-out chicken. The moment that mattered was at 4:53 in the morning, alone in my house, when I finally told myself the truth. That is the moment I got my life back.